Shall we on the road here? You got yours?
Finishing well.
Yeah. Finishing well. Just say
Finishing well.
Okay, so try that again. Finishing well.
Finishing well.
Yeah, you finished it well. All right. That's good on the levels. So those watching, that's what it looks like to make. All right. Well, today on Finishing Well, we're headed back to Social Security, Hans, and it's an interesting thing that on your website there's this tab. It says the 7 worries. That's right. And, you know, it's pretty hard to finish well if you're worried. Just saying, you know, Jesus kind of was clear on worry not being something that we were supposed to do. And so part of taking the worry out of Social Security really is to add some truth in there and some understanding I don't think people really get on the regular news. So here, Hans, you know, share some truth with folks.
Well, you know, I was going over this with Robby before the show, and don't like to throw a lot of statistics at people because they just tend to confuse them, but the news does a lot of that. And if you listen to this, it's, you know, the Social Security's running out of money. What's the point in planning for it? I'm just going to worry about it, and it's not going to be there when I need it. And my thinking on this as a financial planner and somebody teaching folks about Social Security and Social Security decisions is people use this really just to get out of even studying the stuff. Well, what's the use? What's the point? And so I wanted to throw a few numbers at you, is that last year in 2017, Social Security paid out $990 billion in benefits to 67 American Social Security.
67 billion.
67 billion.
People.
So that's about 15,000 a person on average. 990 billion is about $1 trillion. And that's was all paid out of taxes and Social Security contributions. The Social Security Trust Fund has $3 trillion in it.
$3 trillion.
$3 trillion. So it has enough to pay out 3 years of benefits.
Without another dime going in.
You got it. And then last year they added $35 billion to the $3 trillion. So in other words,
so they took in more than they paid out.
Correct. Now, I don't want to take away from what you're hearing on the news, is that there's been a lot of studies, the date keeps moving. If a lot of factors happen and things work the way the folks have predicted it, the Social Security Trust Fund is going to run out of money in 2034. So I don't want to dispute that. I just wanted to point out to people that there's some pretty serious money inside the Social Security Trust Fund, and there's some pretty serious money being paid out to beneficiaries that need it every single month. And
so in the near future, I mean, for certainly the next decade, you know, what they're predicting you're going to do as far as the Social Security is, you know, pretty much on solid footing.
Yeah, it's more than just the next decade, because if the Social Security Trust Fund runs out of money in 2034, we're still going to have all the taxes coming in, and they're not going to let that happen. So they're going to have to go in and do some more fixes as they've done before. I would be more worried about my children and grandchildren than I am myself. Okay?
Right, but you had said something to me that I think that we have a tendency to let the politics of this thing put us in denial. And so it's worth the study to get out of denial and go, okay, we don't need to worry about this necessarily. We need to investigate what are the facts and how can I apply this to my own situation, right?
Yeah, and it's important to learn the facts because the facts play out differently for all 67 million of those beneficiaries. They're all in different situations. They have different preferences. They have other different sources of income. Got different family situations. So it's important to learn the facts that we're going to try to give you some of them today. They're certainly in my book, in the chapter on Social Security, and they're in the workbook where we get a little more technical. And you can download those chapters at cardinalguide.com. So if you really want to read a little bit about this, you don't even have to buy my book. You can go to our website, cardinalguide.com, and you can go under the 7 Worries tab, and you can click down to Social Security, and then you can download that chapter, and it won't cost you a dime.
Right. Or you can just buy the ebook, and what is it, a whopping $3?
It's $1.99.
$1.99. Yes.
Yeah. It's $7.99 for the paper book. But again, I want to get this information out to folks, and you can even listen to another episode of the show on the website and perhaps read the download before you listen to the show. So in any case, first point we really wanted to make is the Social Security Trust Fund has got a lot of money in it. You do need to make good decisions about this for yourself, and we're going to try to give you that. And just pay attention to yourself, because I have a lot of clients when they come in, there's no point in worrying about that. It's all going to be out of money anyhow. And I would just say that be aware of that, is that, of your own behavior where you're going to try to avoid discussing it and making some decisions about it.
Right. And, Hans, God's the hero of all this, and in his way has been taking care of people for now decades, putting together trillions of dollars that have yet to be used. That they're sitting out there waiting to be done. But it's kind of neat that God's also gifted you in this area of understanding these things and how to best take advantage of the laws, the way the government set them out to be taken, to be able to be used.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so is there a particular story that you can recall where you went, oh, God, that's why you have me doing this, so I could help this particular group of people? Is there one that jumps out your mind recently with Social Security?
What I'm also going to tell you is with Social Security, when you say in the first part of that, it's like every client that comes into me that I have that realization. But Joe and Alice, so Joe is a CPA, and he's a chief financial officer or a CFO of a company, and I met him when I was speaking to a group of CPAs and CFOs, and I was fairly intimidated speaking to this group. I mean, I've written a book, and they invited me in, and I'm the person that talks over their dessert or whatever, and went over the book and highlighting a few issues, and we got on Social Security a little bit, and I allow people to ask questions in my talk, and so I make them somewhat informal. He gets my book, reads it, calls me up, comes in for an appointment, and what he's telling me in the appointment is I'm delaying my Social Security till I'm 70. He was 69 years old at the time, and his wife, Alice is 66 at the time and taking Social Security, and she'd been taking it since she was 62 because she's self-employed. She could manage her income in such a way that she didn't have to give any of it back, and he has made this decision on his own to delay his Social Security to 70 because he doesn't really need it right now, and it'll be more, okay? And so it, on the surface, looks like a good decision until we sat down and we asked him, did you realize that you could file under her benefit as a spouse and still allow your benefit to increase till you're 70? And you can do all that while you're still working. And, of course, he didn't realize that. And so his benefit, based upon being the spouse of her collecting, was $700 a month. And so he had missed out on $700 a month for 3 years just when he was lacking. And here I am going into this talk thinking I'm talking to a bunch of CPAs. What am I going to teach them? And that's not even the best part of the story, but I'll let you react to it a little bit, Robby.
Well, and being in that not too distant future where I'm going to be making those decisions, you said something to me the other day that, wow, well, if you delay your Social Security, after you're 65 just go through the math like you did for me that day.
Yeah, and so in my book, I've got my Social Security statement. I mean, I just put the actual thing, and we can teach you how to, and the books will teach you how to get your own Social Security statement. You get them in the mail. But you're going to have to refresh me on the numbers, but Robby is 62, so he could file for Social Security right now, okay? You'd get a lot less than you'd get at your full retirement age, which is going to be 66 or 66 in 2 months. But let's just say you could get $1,500 a month now. Okay.
Right.
So then you'd be forever diminishing your Social Security benefit for the rest of your life. And then because you're working here at the station, you would have to give part of it back. So that's a pretty simple, no-brainer decision. If you lost your job here, or you just decided to retire early or whatever, you would have the option. You'd get a little more than $1,500 a month if you were like 64 or whatever. Let's just say it'd be $1,800 a month. But if you wait till you're 66, I'm just pulling these numbers out of the air, but very well could be like $2,200 a month. Okay, that would be your full retirement age Social Security that you'd be entitled to in 4 years. And you can draw that even if you're still working, and you don't have to give it back. So once you reach full retirement age, you can still work. That's like Joe. You can still work, and you could draw your Social Security, or you could not draw your Social Security. And say, well, why wouldn't I want to draw it? Well, if you waited till you're 70, it'd be more like $3,000 a month, $3,200 a month. Now, what you got to keep in mind is when you're 66, if you elect not to take it, then you're giving up a check for every month between 66 and 70. Last time I checked, there's 48 of them.
Right, and if you're talking about $2,200, it's over $100,000 that you left sitting on the table somewhere.
Right.
And granted, you will pick it up over a period of time, but if you invested that $100,000, or put it in some other situation, like we'll find out about Joe here shortly, there's options. And there's things that can be done with that all have to do with why we don't need to be in denial about this. Well, we're listening to Finishing Well with certified financial planner Hans Scheil. And his book, which we talk about all the time, is the complete Cardinal Guide to planning for and living in retirement. You can find it there at cardinalguide.com, as well as we talked about, you can download this chapter on Social Security or any of the 7 worries, which, by the way, Hans, we don't want people to worry. We want them to get in there and illuminate it with some truth. And that's the idea behind, not being in denial and going there. Again, it's at cardinalguide.com. When we come back, there's lots more to the Alice. Well, I guess it's actually Joe and Alice. Yep. And don't worry, be happy.
All right. Now, is 12 minutes enough?
Well, that's...
you can put the break in at any time, right?
Right. It just seemed like a...
Yeah. It seemed like a good point to stop. Okay, good. And so what we got here in the second part is really spousal benefits. I mean, where you can draw off my spouse, you can draw off your spouse, you can draw off your former spouse, or you can draw off your own work record. And so that's really where Joe comes in to play. So we just really want to talk about spousal benefits here in the second part. And then we want to bring in that it was $700 that he got for another year, and then he's going to getting a much larger Social Security check, well up over $3,000 a month, and he's going to use that to pay the premium on this life insurance in case he leaves this world.
Right. And I wonder where he... Oh, I guess this is the 10th show.
That would be right.
So we're probably going to need a little bit more than that.
Well, and then the other thing is to just talk about how you pay taxes on Social Security, okay, or don't pay taxes on Social Security. And that kind of sets up the next show, but that's a big factor. And then this is the income earnings limit that would apply to you if you were to take your Social Security now. So if you took the $1,500-1,600 a month. I think we need to finish Joe, talk about the life insurance, and then we'll just make reference. That's on another show, but all this stuff mixes together. Then we'll talk about taxes. And then we may or may not talk about minor children, adopted grandchildren, that if you're collecting your Social Security, if you got somebody under 18 that you're responsible for their support, you've done all things right, you can collect half your Social Security check again for them.
What I think I would like to do real quick before we get back into Joe and Alice is talk about the letter that came to Franklin Roosevelt, and getting back to the Don't Worry, Be Happy theme of the show, saying, we have a tendency to let the politics put us in denial, but a little more truth to illuminate the situation would be actually what happened that started it to begin with, which was, Franklin Roosevelt was going to make sure that this lady's mother got $1 a day.
And I got to remember where that fits into where that's written into the book. I think that might be in the workbook.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah, so it's in the workbook. Yep. My associate put that in there. I'm real proud of him.
Really?
He wrote the Social Security section of the workbook. He's the technical dude. But he actually added some soft stuff that I think is real good.
So Mrs. M.A. Zoller,
Yeah,
on
you can
behalf
check
of
that.
her 82-year-old mother.
You can even say that it's on page 1 of the workbook.
Page what?
It's page 1.
Oh, well, that's easy. All right.
See, these people don't put a page number on page 1 because they already know it's page 1. These are real book people. Okay.
I get that. All right, welcome back to Finishing Well. And today's show is kind of a Social Security, don't worry, be happy. And along those lines, we've been talking about that based on the politics, we have a tendency to want to go in denial about Social Security, or I know I do, and something that I really had not put much thought to. But as I read your workbook, actually on page 1, your associate put in an amazing story. I had no idea that originally Franklin Roosevelt's heart got set on this idea of Social Security because he got a letter from a Mrs. M.A. Zoller, whose mother had no benefit, had nothing to sustain her, and she was 82 years, and you can imagine a widow. And think about God's heart for a minute on where that was. Obviously, unfortunately, there was no church helping her mother, or she wouldn't have been writing the president a letter. And God's wanting this lady to be helped. And so obviously it touched Franklin's heart. And what she asked for was amazingly low, but think about it. This is all she wanted. She wanted $1 a day for her mother. Just $1 a day is all that. And I guess there were 30 states at the time, according to that introduction, that already had some type of pension program in their state governments. But obviously Franklin was like, we got to do something.
Yeah. And what we have now, almost 100 years later, is the program like we talked about in the beginning of the show that's got $3 trillion in assets, and it's got benefit payments of almost $1 trillion by the year, and we got 67 trillion people.
Yeah, that, by the way,
67 billion people.
67 billion people is, you told me, which I wouldn't know unless you hadn't told me. That's 25%. That's a quarter of the people in the United States of America are benefiting now from Mrs. Zoller's vision to send Franklin a letter. Yeah. And it's a little bit more than $1 a day they're getting.
I mean, God's the star of the show here, and he's working through, there's the President of the United States, and he's working through us to really to you and with you to really explain this program so you can, when you're in need in retirement, that you're going to be collecting the amount that's the best for you.
So getting back to Joe and Alice, and the situation was that you found that, wow, here's some money that you didn't realize you could have been collecting, and now you're collecting it, based on understanding his needs. His family had a real need.
Well, he was wanting to hire me just to do Social Security planning only, okay? And explain this part of the book. And through a discussion, he decided to hire us to do a whole financial plan for him, which really doesn't cost that much more. And his wife was very supportive of that. So we looked at Social Security and the other 6 worries, or the total. We went through and we wrote up a financial plan for him. And what we discovered is these folks didn't have a lot of savings. And they make a lot of income. He does. That's why he's still working, and he enjoys his work. But if he were to die suddenly, or even in a few years, she's going to be in a heap of trouble with their lifestyle, and they would have had to do some serious changes. Let's just put it that way. And so the answer to that, of course, is life insurance. And then he is sitting there thinking, well, I can't afford life insurance, with all these other things. And,
not at 69 years old. Oh, my word. Yeah.
But we went through and we did some homework. We represent over 50 companies that write life insurance. We could have more, and we picked from what is the best for a particular person. He's in good health. And we used $500 a month of that $700 extra dollars a month that he's getting now by filing against his wife's Social Security just for a year. And in a year, he's going to be 70. And so when he turns 70, he's then going to have a Social Security check of over $3,000 a month. So he's out of that going to easily be able to pay this $500 a month and carry that on for the rest of his life. And if he were to die suddenly and his wife would need to live, they're going to be minus 1 Social Security check. She's still going to get his Social Security check, but it's just not enough. And a nice big life insurance policy is going to come into play for him.
And the neat thing you told me about that, too, because it's not only obviously if he dies, but what if he has a stroke and he's all of a sudden needs long-term care? There's no income coming in there for his wife either, but part of what you set up for him there was some long-term care stuff.
Well, what we actually did is we put him in a life insurance policy that allows you to get at the death benefit early if you needed to pay a long-term care bill or home health care. So, if the life insurance policy is $500,000 and we can draw out $75,000 or $100,000 a year to pay a long-term care bill. Now, keep in mind, if he eats up that life insurance for 3 or 4 years, paying the long-term care bill, that's going to leave a little bit less for her, but they're going to be real glad to have it. So it can pay, either way.
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties of, God, you had you there at such a time as this to protect his family. But if they just said Social Security, I'm a CPA, I know the numbers, and I just run it. There's a lot more to it.
This guy wasn't real fond of life insurance companies. Let's just put it that way. But he became fond of me, and he's a valued client and a wonderful guy, and his wife's taken care of, and he's probably going to live a long life. And, he's not going to resent that life insurance or the payment at all.
Yeah, and it leads us into another little bit of a discussion I think illuminates more truth, is that whole idea of spousal support. And can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, what a lot of folks miss is when you're married, or if you were married in the past, either through death, your spouse passed away, or through divorce, if you're married to a person for 10 years, or you're still married to them, you can file your benefits under yourself, on your own work record, or you can file under the person you were married to's work record. So you're not going to get as much, you're not going to get 100% of their benefit filing under them. You're going to get 50% of their benefit filing under them. That's a kind of a generalization. But So if you have somebody like my wife who really hasn't, ever since we had children, she hasn't really worked outside of the home, so she really doesn't have much of a work record. Me, I've worked like, a madman. I mean, it's just, I've worked, if anybody has a workaholic thing going on, it's probably me. But I've made the maximum Social Security income for whatever. So I've got a very good Social Security record. And she will be able to file for 50% of my benefit. And that doesn't come out of my benefit. That will come out of just the government's trust fund. I mean, it's just, so we'll get 150% of my benefit while we're both alive.
Yeah, so to get back to Joe's story for a minute, because it's a little confusing to me, is that here's a man that obviously he's a CFO of a pretty big company. He's probably got the maximum coming when he turns 70, and he's waited till 70 till he got that. But his wife at 62 begins to do that. Now, I'm trying to understand. He files for his wife's way smaller when he's 69.
Right. Which he could have done at 66.
Really?
So he missed 3 years of it.
And it would not affect his coverage at all.
I mean, providing you do all the filing correct. I mean, there's some technicalities here, but he can suspend his benefit, file a restricted application as the spouse of her, collect the spousal benefit. And by the way, the government's doing away with this so that people that are like 55 or 60 don't be licking your chops, because it's just
When's it going away?
Kind of that's a whole nother thing. I got to get it out and read it. But it still
right
works
now. It's
now.
there.
It still works now. Okay, and it would have worked for him 3 years ago, but he just didn't know about it. So he really lost out on $700 a month, $8,400 a year for 3 years, but he was into me where he could still get it for one more year. So we just got on the phone, we called Social Security all while we were sitting there, and we just got it all started.
So I hope you're hearing this, ladies that are 66 or older and had been, they lived with a husband for whatever years and unfortunately left him. Those people can get that spousal support and not affect their ex-husband's retirement at all, right?
Yeah. Listen, I had a lady speaking to me that was married to a guy for 10 years, like 30 years ago, and she was like 66, and she's like a Social Security expert. She hadn't seen the guy in like 30 years, but she was married to him for the 10 years and however much minimum, and she was getting half of his Social Security check, which was, apparently he made a lot of money, and so she was doing that, and then he died. Still hadn't seen him, didn't go to his funeral. I don't know that for sure. And then her benefit went up to 100% of his benefit.
So
after his death, and she's collecting that. I mean, she told that whole story right up in front of us. So there are ways to know the ins and outs of this, and there's nothing dishonest about this at all. They expect it. This is the way they wrote the rules.
Right, to take care of people that have been married and they've sacrificed their, occupation for their husband or wife, as the case may be, to some extent, because it was a joint deal. And now it's kind of cool. It goes right along with that. Don't worry, be happy. You got this stuff coming.
So you got spouses, you got divorced spouses, you have deceased spouses, and then you also have minor children and adopted grandchildren. Now, they're real tough on the adopted grandchildren. That's all got to be done exactly right. They really need to be relying on you. But there's many people that's going on out there. And if you're collecting Social Security, you got somebody under 18, they're attending school, you can get a significant extra benefit for your adopted grandchildren, or if you're 64, 66, 68, and you have 16-year-old kids.
You mean my grandchildren?
If you had to adopt them. I mean, when you go out calling on these folks that are retiring, these homes are full of little kids running around, or middle-aged,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. They're taking care of
their grandparents are really their parents legally.
Right.
Okay? And if all that's done properly, if you really go in and try to make them that just to get the Social Security, that doesn't work. But if that's the situation, yeah. But if that's the situation, as it is that you're providing for your grandchildren and providing for their care and their financial support, you can collect an extra benefit on your Social Security for that. And if you have children, there's a lot of people in their 60s that have minor children still in school.
Including me.
Yeah.
But we got to get to this tax thing. We don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah. Okay. And well, just let's summarize it in the sense that Social Security is tax-free, comes to you tax-free if you don't have substantial other income. Okay? And there's thresholds for that. They're all in my book. And so if you have other income, and there's a whole graded scale, you can pay taxes as much as 85% of your Social Security check. So people with high incomes, they get these large Social Security checks, but then they got to pay taxes on 85%, or in other words, 15% of it is tax-free. The rest of it, they got to pay income taxes. And that replenishes the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yeah, it's for me, I jumped on, I got to pay 85% of my
No.
Social Security tax. No, what you're saying is 85% of it's taxable.
Bull. At whatever your tax rates are.
Right. And so, there's a lot of information which leads to, gee, I need to get out of denial about this thing. Let's get it out in the open. Let God take a look at it. Let some other people seek wise counsel. A certified financial planner like Hans Schall, obviously, we're just saying, get it out in the open. Let's get it out of denial, because the reason why we worry about this stuff is, perfect love drives out fear. We have to bring God into it and help us stop to worry and begin to, finish well with our lives. Well, what a wonderful show today. Again, finishing well with certified financial planner Hans Schall. His book, The Complete Cardinal Guide to Planning for and Living in Retirement. It's all there at cardinalguide.com. Thanks again, Hans.
Thank you. Okay, we need to turn that off.
Now, that was a great show. That may be the best show we ever did.
That's great. It's great. I think so.